Hey, I'm Tom. That back there is Mike. And my dad died a few years ago. When he did, the last thing he said to me was very poignant. Tommy, whatever you do in this life, make sure to tell people all about the brief history of WCW Power Hour. And try to do it in like a 12 to 15 minute YouTube video. That's my role in life, is to do that for you. So 1989, pro wrestling's doing really well across the board. WCW, of course, not doing as well as the WWF in terms of attendance or merchandising. Let me tell you a dirty little secret they don't want you to know. WCW on television, years before Nitro, did great television ratings. Like, there were often times that the cable shows that WCW produced were beating primetime wrestling. That's not in the narrative that they want you to know. Turner wants another hour of WCW television, and thus we get NWA Power Hour. Debuts June the 23rd, 1989 on TBS, which is cable television, but 5 minutes later. And even with TBS being weird about time, I feel like Power Hour had the weirdest time slot in television history. 10:20 p.m. Not 10:15, not 10:30, 10:20 p.m. on Friday evenings. Though it was preempted or moved around often because in the summer of 1989, the Braves played every Friday night. And let's be real, the only things TBS had going for it at the time were Andy Griffith, WCW, and baseball. The first big event to ever happen on Power Hour was about a month into its run, July 14th of 89, a moment that many refer to as the Marietta Massacre. For those of you that don't know, a rare television cage match. It was the Road Warriors against the Freebirds. Well into the heat of the match, Michael Hayes unlocks the cage door and waves down the Road Warriors' other enemies at the time, the Samoan SWAT team. Got 3 big Samoans, you got 3 Freebirds. They shut the cage door behind them, and for one of the few instances in the Road Warriors' career, they were bloodied and beaten down. They were made to look vulnerable, and that's what made it stand out. As they used it to build up the War Games match at the Great American Bash that year, with the Freebirds and the SST against the Road Warriors, the Midnight Express, and Dr. Death Steve Williams. Kind of a weird match, but it was nice to not have Horsemen versus blah 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 as the War Games match du jour that year. Another feature that made Power Hour stand out from the beginning was the Wrestling News Network. Now, you'd think that since WCW and CNN were owned by the same company, they could, have just done like CNN wrestling or even gotten access to like the actual CNN logo file so they didn't have to draw up that weird parody version. Actually gotten the artist to like put a W in there and not have to like sketch that one out with like pencils and stuff. That was horrible. And what made WNN stand out was it wasn't just a WCW news segment within like storylines and such. Gordon Soley hosted every week, and the majority of it was NWA based. He talked about NWA stories in the top 10, but he would also cover like other territories. He'd talk about, Texas and Memphis. I specifically remember one about, him congratulating Eric Embry on taking down World Class and getting the USWA up and running in Dallas. Of course, he talked about the WWF, and again, didn't bury him. Congratulated Hulk Hogan on the success of No Holds Barred. Incredibly weird. And though the segment itself lasted, about 2.5 years well into 1991, they changed it within a few months to only cover WCW. Jim Herd started watching him and was like, what are we doing wasting our time promoting, like, the Jake the Snake Roberts, Rick Rude feud? This is our airtime. They didn't pay for this. Something else they tried during the initial Power Hour run was something called running the Gauntlet. It's where you would take a wrestler and then you would randomly draw 3 quote blockers. And that wrestler would have to wrestle the first blocker Friday night on Power Hour, the second blocker Saturday night on WCW, and the third blocker Sunday night on Main Event. If he got through all 3 of the blockers, he got 15 grand. If he lost to any of them, the first, the second, or the third, they each split the 15 grand 3 ways. So if you lost on Friday night, the guy on Sunday is still getting paid. The most memorable one being Scott Steiner going through like the top of the heel card all in one weekend, including Ric Flair. and establishing himself as a name beyond just the Steiner brother tag team. Unfortunately, running the Gauntlet ended because of the preemptions. Again, it's Friday night. Baseball season's happening. The Braves are moving around the show a lot. Running the Gauntlet ends, and they moved the show from Friday nights to Saturday mornings. They'd already been airing replays at 7 a.m. normally on Saturday mornings on TBS. Now let's just put the whole darn thing. Put the whole darn thing there. We're already running at that time anyway. Just stop with this Friday night silliness. Now, at this point, when it moves from Friday evenings to Saturday mornings, some folks notice that the show gets a bit repetitive because you see WCW's taping a lot of television, so much television at this time. Like, I believe if you count up all the hours WCW was producing of television, it's more than like even 2 or 3 of the big companies produce in 2026 combined. And there's so much wrestling in 2026. And thus they had to give themselves some slack. What they would do is they would tape a bunch of matches for Worldwide. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, they would scramble those matches up order-wise. And they would have Jim Ross overdub new commentary as if it was a brand new match that you hadn't seen yet. And if you didn't have cable, or if you didn't get syndicated worldwide in your area, you didn't know the difference. But if you were a hardcore WCW fan that watched everything, you were kind of getting screwed. The Jim Ross matches he had to call alone on Power Hour are a delight, because you can tell he's annoyed as hell to be having to sit in this booth by himself, dubbing over matches that aired 3 weeks earlier and trying to claim that they're brand new matches. It's hilarious. Highly recommend, especially 1991 Power Hour. It's hilarious. I think the most egregious reusing of worldwide footage was November 1991. So they did this thing for sweeps, syndicated sweeps, where you gotta get your ratings up high because that's when the numbers are really emphasized for advertiser spending for the next year. A month, every episode of Worldwide, they did a submit or surrender match on each episode. Submit or surrender being like a fancy word for an I quit match. No rules you got to give up to win. This was the only show they were doing it on Worldwide. But wouldn't you know it, like 3 weeks later, Power Hour had submit or surrender matches with all of these same guys. And they couldn't like acknowledge it or anything on commentary. It's like, oh, Sting and Cactus Jack are wrestling again in another submit or surrender match that has the exact same finish. Of course, mid-1992, Cowboy Bill Watts comes in, changes everything up, starts peeing out of balconies. It's a whole thing. And one of the things he switched up was the Power Hour. And for weeks, they're like, brand new Power Hour's coming at you soon. Brand new Power Hour. All new Power Hour. They kept the same graphics. It's still reheated matches from WCW Worldwide. But he pulls Jim Ross off of commentary for Power Hour because he feels like he's too good for it. So now you got Tony Schiavone replacing Jim Ross with new color man Larry Zbyszko. Zbyszko, who had done NWA Pro Chicago commentary in the past. This was his first post-retirement commentary assignment. And he's perfectly fine. Larry Zbyszko is always Larry Zbyszko. Only real changes other than that is Missy Hyatt would do a segment that they moved over from Main Event, where she's just like, hey guys, here's what's going on in this storyline. And then the same thing with Teddy Long, who no longer had any guys to manage. He was just this guy that talked about other storylines and then it would go like, homie, don't play that. We were all watching in living color at that point. I was a big Men on Film guy. Hated it. Actually, I loved it. I wanted to do the thing. Early 1993, Bill Watts gets canned because, racism. Eric Bischoff is assigned in the mess of it all to replace Tony Schiavone on Power Hour. And then a couple months later, Bischoff himself becomes the head TV producer in WCW. And one of his first decisions as head TV producer is to replace Zbyszko on Power Hour as the color guy with Blackjack Mulligan. Blackjack Mulligan, who of course is working as a road agent at that point. He had done some color stuff for like the IWF in Florida. Wasn't very good doing that. And wouldn't you know, he was terrible on Power Hour. One of the all-time worst color guys. He's so bad that within 2 weeks, Bischoff pulls himself off the show so he doesn't have to work with him. Kind of like typical middle management, you know, you get a thing in your inbox from your boss like, hey, you got to do this thing. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do it, so I'm going to pass it off to Gordon solely. And Gordon couldn't even handle it because within a week or two of Blackjack Mulligan being with Gordon, Mulligan gets replaced by Larry Zbyszko. And Mulligan is never seen again on television. July 1993, a few months after that, Bischoff really starts digging his claws in to changing things. We're about to start taping TV at Disney World, especially worldwide. And with them taping TV at Disney, they couldn't just re-air worldwide matches anymore on Power Hour and be like, oh, they're different matches because we got different commentary. Ooh. I understand the Georgia Mountain Center in Gainesville is like the Disney World of North Georgia. However, the Disney MGM shows look like a game show, whereas the other shows look like sad, dark basements. So Bischoff moves Power Hour into the editing bay that they produce WCW television in, and it pretty much looks like the WWF event centers. You got Bischoff and Zbyszko sitting at a desk that's awkwardly put in front of all the editing screens. And Bischoff really tries to turn this thing into like a morning talk show. He starts every episode with like, good morning, America. I'm Eric Bischoff. Really cheeses it up. There is a short period where they do try to redub commentary specific for Power Hour, even though they are saying these are worldwide matches. Tony Schiavone and Terry Taylor redub them. Terry Taylor also hosts In the Studio with Bischoff for a bit, which one of the more obnoxious wrestling on-air teams in history. And they also add a segment to the show called WCW Flashback that they took from main events, where they re-air like an old pay-per-view match. And most of them are Ric Flair matches. They found out that Ric Flair pay-per-view matches from like 3-4 years before still did better ratings than literally anything new. And it didn't cost anything to press play on a old tape. But even with all the sugar coating and the new coats of paint and the changing of formats and all that, Power Hour couldn't be saved. And in March of 1994, we say adieu to the Power Hour. The time slot ends up becoming WCW Pro. Ironically enough, it becomes a bunch of first run matches from normally the Georgia Mountain Center in Gainesville, Georgia. So that's my brief soliloquy about WCW Power Hour and its brief history on the airwaves. Of course, if you like the video, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, hype if it's there. If it ain't, I'm not your mom. I can't make you do it. Do the things. Of course, if you haven't done so already, become a member of the channel. You get bonus streams once a month and my eternal gratitude. So once again, my name is Tom. That back there's Mike. And I really hope that I've done my father proud.